I absolutely love my wife, but she's really stubborn about dumb shit. Throwaway, but I'm absolutely stunned to learn she doesn't know how metric measurements work. Today I effed up by calling her out on it. She always seems to confuse ounces and milliliters, but I figured she just misspoke and usually could figure out what she meant. We have children together and now I'm starting to realize she thinks metric is just another name for the same measurements. Seriously, had a huge argument about how many fluid ounces we are feeding our baby. I asked, why did you tell the pediatrician we're giving 3 milliliters per feeding? It's 3 ounces, that's a huge difference. She looked at me completely serious and said those are the same thing. I said, wait, what are you talking about? And she proceeded to tell me how she learned that milliliter are equivalent to fluid oz in nursing school and that she didn't make a mistake. I explained that she must have misunderstood because that doesn't make sense. She swore that she was correct and she wasn't wrong. I was stunned. Then I asked, why would there be 2 naming systems for measurements if they are the exact same? She said that metric is just the names Europeans use. Lol, we're American, shocker. When I showed her the correct conversion on Google, she suddenly backtracked and tried to say that it must have changed since she went to school, lol what? And then that she actually meant ounces are equal to liters, which is even worse. Here's where I effed up. In my shocked frustration I said, well shit, no wonder you didn't pass your exams, can't be giving people lethal doses. Now she's pissed at me. Yesterday I turned 18 years old. For the past 6 years, like clockwork, every day on my birthday we'd go to the same place for dinner and I'd always get the same thing. For those who are a bit confused, I have extreme OCD and high-functioning autism. Which means I'm very well regulated and like things to stay the same way that they always have been. Back to the story. Every year on my birthday we go to Applebee's. The first thing I would get is the steak and shrimp parmesan with a side of loaded mashed potatoes, and cheesy steamed broccoli. Hate me or not, with a side of mozzarella sticks. In total it's around $30, a bit expensive I know. I couldn't really tell something was off until a bit later because when me, my mother, my stepfather, and my older brother sat down. They didn't really say anything. I was confused at first and started tapping my fingers on one another like I always do. The conversation went a little bit like this. Not an exact replica. Mother, well. I was rather confused. Well? Mother, aren't you gonna call the waiter over? This gave me extreme anxiety. I have extreme issues with speaking with people and I tend to stutter and get very, very scared, if that's the right word. I asked her if she could do it and she does it in a huff. My dad and brother staring nonchalantly. As she calls the waiter over, the alarm bells are ringing in my head. This is never how it went before. As the waiter gets to the table he asks everyone what they want and everyone's orders. As he gets to me, my mother stops him and tells him separate bill. This is when my heart began beating very fast. I don't know a job, all the money I get is from our neighbors raking leaves. I just kind of freeze. I don't really say anything and I get a really bad stomach ache from the anxiety. This is where I am conflicted on whether I'm the asshole or not. My mother would explain at the table that now that I am 18 I should be able to pay for my own things. I was already feeling nauseous from the situation, so I just said I don't have the money. My mom kinda huffs and shoos the waiter away. This soured the dinner party. However, my mom also paid for my 23-year-old brother. My family were calling me an entitled little a-hole the whole ride home. When I got home I just ran to my room and cried. They've been ignoring me the whole day. I may be bad at social cues, but my family has never acted like this before, I mean never. They've been treating me horrible the whole day. I feel very angry and upset at my family. If I would have been warned I would have saved my raking money. I also don't mean this to be a validation post, I have all the information you have. I'm just very confused and am terrible with social cues. Asperger's, am I right? My family gets a little tight on money. I guess I really should have asked before. I assumed they were gonna pay it for me. But I missed out on my birthday dinner because I wasn't mature enough to bring my own money. I'm just gonna rake leaves for a couple weeks to order it from takeout. Throwaway account. In case I regret this post as much as I regret what prompted it. Sorry for the length. Didn't realize all this word vomit would end up being somewhat cathartic. Last night I decided to get into my car completely naked. I had one job. Meet my GF at her place. Drive us back to my place. End of story. However, as the day was coming to an end, the anticipation of spending time alone with my GF was clouding my judgment. All of a sudden I was thinking it would be kind of funny to show up with nothing on behind the wheel and saying something silly like, "Excuse me, ma'am. Did you call an Uber X?" I imagined her laughing at the absurdity. I wasn't too worried about other people catching me because my plan was not to interact with anyone else and to stay in the car until I was back inside my garage. I realized I effed up the moment I pulled into the parking bay and noticed my GF standing in the rain with an umbrella and her 2 roommates huddled underneath. All of them were frantically waving at me like OMG, please hurry, it's pouring. I had 2 choices. Proceed as planned and accept my fate. Or preserve my dignity and leave my GF and her roommates in the rain. I drove my naked ass out of there feeling conflicted as FK. In my defense, there was never any mention of roommates joining us. My GF called and assumed I didn't see them somehow. I apologized and explained, albeit fearfully, why she just witnessed me drive away without her. I promised I'd be back to pick them up in 30 minutes or less. Fully dressed. It was tricky trying to pinpoint if my GF was entertained or annoyed during that phone call. That being said, I couldn't help but feel like I was pushing her buttons when I asked her to lie to her roommates about my reason for fleeing the premises. My GF said it wouldn't be necessary to tell lies because she had me on loudspeaker the entire time. Crickets. I died inside. I could hear the roommates laughing in the background before one of them said tell him to turn around. At that moment, another call came through. Unknown number. My saving grace. Or so I thought. I said goodbye to my GF and discovered it was my mother who didn't realize she was still using her work phone after hours. My mom asked where I was because she just arrived at my place. I said I wasn't home and stressed what a bad time it was for her to pop in unannounced. She said she had leftover lasagna for me. My favorite. I said I'd be home in a few minutes and made it clear that when I arrive I'm gonna drive directly into my garage and open the front door from the inside. I emphasized that she should remain in her car, out of the rain, and under no circumstances should she approach me until she saw me in the house looking decent. My mom approached me as soon as she heard me honk. Her vehicle was blocking my driveway, but instead of getting out of the way so I could access my garage and avoid being seen in the nude, she got out of her car without warning and marched to my car with a plate of lasagna wrapped in tinfoil. I was tempted to drive away again, but I didn't have the balls to abandon both women in my life on the same night in the same way. I rolled down my window and said, "Mother, stop." She did not stop. Not until she realized I was wearing nothing but my seat belt. I asked her to please move her vehicle and not ask questions. She caught me naked. Of course she asked questions. Lots of questions. I made it sound like it was nothing more than a dumb prank between friends, but my mom was convinced I was under the influence of her nemesis, Satan. I knew what that meant. She was using Satan as a metaphor to describe my GF, which she's done before. Usually I'd bite and we would argue, but I didn't have time to dive into that debate because once I was done getting dressed, I had to leave again. On my way out, my mom proceeded to pray out loud. I froze at the door and had to wait until she was done updating God about yet another classic example of how her son was being tempted by the flesh into committing acts of indecency. As usual, it was over-the-top theatrics and passive-aggressive shaming towards my GF. Somehow all of this was her fault, not mine. I was just a victim of a Jezebel. It took everything in my power not to lose my shit during that prayer. Fast forward to the most uncomfortable car ride of my life. My GF didn't really make conversation, or eye contact, other than asking if I didn't mind dropping her roommates at the mall. I could tell she was embarrassed by me. It was my first time meeting her roommates in person and it was obvious they didn't know how to behave around me. I apologized to all of them for my actions and promised never to leave my house without clothes again. Not gonna lie, acknowledging what I did made it even more awkward. I got 0 replies. Just forced smiles. My GF turned on the radio instead of talking to me. Due to the bad weather we had one radio station available. A talk station. So, there we all were, awkwardly listening to the radio. Last night.